Thanks for joining me again. I want to thank everyone who participated in our public forum about data centers on Tuesday. I was joined by Council President Natalie Fani Gonzalez and other council members. This meeting drew more than 100 people in person and others online. We want to ensure that lessons learned from previous studies and openings elsewhere are applied here. So my team and I developed a list of considerations and recommendations we've shared with the public, the council, and the stakeholders to gather feedback that can inform the county council as it develops legislation. It was a pretty long list, but it's not everything. So it's a good starting point, but it shouldn't be treated as covering everything. One takeaway from me from all of this, and in thinking about where we are in this process, is that a moratorium of no more than 6 months should probably be in place by the county council until it finalizes and passes regulations. It is important to get it right the first time, particularly because a large data center is now being proposed and it has already been approved by the planning board. There's a real risk that a plan could be submitted for approval by permitting without the safeguards that people have been talking about, many of which I would guess will have council support. Rather than trying to race to get something through the council in the middle of trying to deal with the budget, I believe it would be helpful for the council to create a space by giving themselves a 6-month window. I don't think we should take the approach that we can come back and fix things later if we don't get it right the first time. 6 months is not a significant amount of time, but it should be more than enough time for the council to give it their full attention and to consider public comments. There is already a lot of good data available, and I don't feel a task force to gather more is necessary. Multiple jurisdictions, including 2 nearby, have hashed through the issues, and there's nothing unique about being here. We already know the risk, like the threat to our power grid if we don't require companies to help supply more of the electricity, or all of the electricity. I was intrigued by a project in Pennsylvania using small natural gas turbines that they say can address power supply and emissions questions. I'm trying to get the data and the substance of their proposals so I can share it. That example shows that companies are beginning to consider how to address public concerns, further underscoring the need for less lengthy task force work. Also, learning about what counties have done regarding to regulating the centers would be informative since they are tackling the same problems we are. There are some must-haves that I think are important, and here are some of the things that I think we need to talk about. First, data centers should be required to bring their own power. This may be one of the most important things, if not the most important thing we can do. If they don't bring their own power, they're going to put a massive strain on the grid and continue to fuel already exploding energy prices. The supply problem needs to be fixed and addressed, and not with coal and diesel-powered power plants. Ensure data centers are only built in areas intended for industrial use, and there should be significant buffers between residential and community uses. First preference should be for battery backup because it minimizes any justification for fossil fuel backups. After that, if that's not feasible or sufficient, preference should be given to the use of natural gas generators over diesel generators. Requires strict emission controls, especially carbon capture and capturing unburned gases, and limit their use to emergencies. Preference closed-loop cooling systems that don't use water at all. Develop stormwater management plans for data centers for the very, very large impervious surfaces they create. Require that water usage results in the water being returned to the environment clean and at the same temperature when it was withdrawn from the water source. Require buffer zones for noise and revisit the noise ordinance to ensure data centers comply with what is acceptable. As we heard this week from someone who shared their feedback, why even bother going down this road? We've seen the frustration data centers have brought to other communities, but they were approved without the kind of protections that we're talking about now. It's important to start this discussion now and bring in as many viewpoints as possible to craft a clear vision of what we as a community want. We have the power to control many things to protect our environment and to keep our electricity bills from skyrocketing. Here's another important point. No tax breaks. There is no reason in the world for us to subsidize data centers if the whole purpose of bringing them here is because they generate major revenue. They don't generate revenue from employees. In fact, they will have very few employees. So if we're not getting revenue off the property taxes and on the personal property taxes, there is no revenue for us to get from the employees. So it's important that we not subsidize these projects. I still believe there's a way to do this, but I'm glad I heard so many legitimate concerns from our public. Residents can also provide written comments by emailing climate@montgomerycountymd.gov. Looking forward to seeing what the council does with my recommendations. I don't know if anyone around here has ever appreciated 30-degree weather more than I have. Last week brought Arctic temperatures and temperatures far below where we're used to. Our county's weather expert, Matt Mizorko, testified before the council this week that if this storm had been entirely snow, we would have likely gotten over 20 inches. But if this were just snow, even 20 inches, our job of clearing the roads would have been a lot easier. Instead, we got a layer of 3 or 4 inches of ice, and that changed the whole nature of our response and proved to be a frustrating challenge. I've never seen the weather do this before, and if you've lived here your entire life, you probably haven't either. Regular snow shovels didn't work on this mess. I've had people text me pics of mangled shovels caused by them using them to try to break through the ice. Now think about how our plows interacted with the ice. On first pass, they pushed the snow to the side. That snow then turned to ice that evening when the sleet fell, and people couldn't shovel their way out the next day. If it hadn't iced, people would have been able to shovel, and we probably would have been fine. But the theory of plowing one side of the street so people can dig out and move their cars to the other side failed because people couldn't dig themselves out. So we couldn't plow the other side of the street. We were pretty paralyzed by this, not by lack of planning or lack of effort or lack of people, but because we're not equipped for storms like this. Why would we be? This was an historic freeze that impacted our entire region equally. Everybody was stuck with the same mess. Everybody around here has had trouble getting out of it. It's not reasonable to expect us to have heavy-duty ice removal trucks standing by for years in the event of something like this. It would have cost us tens of millions of dollars to have had the front-end loaders, the dump trucks, the small bulldozers, not to mention probably another 500 employees on the ready to deal with this ice storm. Not only did our equipment struggle, but so did our residents. Our sidewalks were not shoveled when they were required, and we extended the time because we recognized the challenges that people faced with the ice. I was also reluctant to expect people to shovel in single-digit temperatures with wind chills below zero. I was very concerned about potential impacts or risks that we might be subjecting people to. Some patience on our part I felt was necessary. I wish everyone could see and appreciate the way our transportation crews continued to work despite the difficulties to allow for travel in challenging conditions. At this point, our folks have transitioned to using smaller equipment to deal with intersections and corners. However, in some neighborhoods without sidewalks or plowed sidewalks, kids might have to walk in the middle of the street where there is only one lane, which I hate the thought of. Like I said, I'm not blaming residents for their sidewalks being the way they were because they weren't equipped for it either. But we are expecting sidewalks to get shoveled now. Hopefully warmer temperatures break the grip of the ice. This week we resumed our responsibility in holding property owners responsible for sidewalk inspections, and we're going to be checking close to 400 complaints in 2 days, and we gave home and property owners the proper notice to clear their sidewalks within 24 hours. I'm glad these notices weren't given when the temperatures were closer to zero, because that would have put more of our residents at serious risk of injury. Still, clearing sidewalks is important to make it safer for kids and adults to get to school and work safely. I'd like to thank our employees and contractors who've worked nonstop over the last week and a half to clear these roads. I don't think people understand what a tough job this work is in the best of conditions, and these last 10 days have really put our incredible professionals to the test. Things will continue to improve the longer we go without snow and with warmer temperatures, because crews are still working on moving ice out of the way. I am really disappointed by Tuesday's council decision by the majority of the council to not adopt my recommendations and create a higher debt limit ceiling for capital expenditures in the near future. I will continue to argue for restoring the county's purchasing power that was lost during the 2009 recession. Our school system is finally being honest about its needs, and this is the best way to support the improvements the community has been waiting for. We received a record high request from the Board of Education totaling $2.8 billion, which is more than $1 billion above the last CIP. The county's ability to address its infrastructure needs has been severely hampered by the fact that general obligation bond limits have not kept pace with inflation. Issuances have been capped now at just $280 million for the last 4 years. To put that in perspective, in 2009, our bond limit was $300 million. When I was on the council, the bond limit got as high as $340 million. Now we're at 280, and this year they voted to go up to 300. There is no way that you can buy in 2026 what you bought in 2009 for the same dollars. You're probably buying half or much or less for the money you're spending today. To sustain the same purchasing power as $300 million would have been in today's dollars, we would need to issue more than $550 million in bonds annually. There is no way that school repairs and construction matches the prices of 2009. We will probably do half the work for the same amount of money. It happened because they were never honest with their needs and only asked for what could be done within the parameters of our GO bond limits. This is a problem created both by the school board and by the councils, and I was on some of those councils. Not adequately funding bonds meant that we weren't doing the projects that needed to be done. The school system not telling people the urgency of the repairs and how badly we were falling behind made this less of an urgent problem than it was. They had to make a choice given the bond limits, and they chose funding the necessary expansions rather than focusing on repairs. But right now, we're not dealing with an expansion phase. We're finishing some projects out, but the bulk of what we need now is to catch up on all the repairs that never got done. While the county council recently voted to raise the guidelines to $300 million, it is insufficient to sustain even existing projects like road resurfacing and building system replacements, let alone any new initiatives. We have done this to ourselves through chronic underinvestment, forcing the county to use older infrastructure longer, which increases long-term maintenance costs. A higher debt limit is fiscally viable due to years of restraint. The argument is aided by the fact that we continue to see revenue growth even as our economic growth lags. I've recommended issuing $340 million in bonds in FY27 and increasing that amount by $10 million each year until we get to $390 million in FY32. This would keep debt service at a modest 10.3% over the next 6 years, well below the county's average over the last decade. This is the first time in 15 years that the county's debt service to the general fund revenues ratio has fallen near the self-imposed limit of 10% of the guidelines. In other words, we have sufficient cushion now to make this investment. The state has raised its revenue outlook, driven by personal income tax collections since our December estimates were released. The same pattern will hold. If the council insists on $300 million bond limit, county facilities will go another year without critical improvements, totaling $390 million over the next 6 years. There are going to be schools without air conditioning and with systems that aren't functioning. It's just simply not reasonable to continue this practice of underfunding critical infrastructure, particularly when it could lead to serious problems with our schools. I wish the county council could see this as an opportunity that it is to increase the debt limit without compromising the county's AAA credit rating. Our regional competitiveness relies on stellar education system. We have a crown jewel of a school system, but it is aging. It's time to consider how much we stand to lose by failing to make the necessary financial equipment to education in our county. I want to thank Montgomery County's Commission for Women and for their efforts behind a new campaign to protect our residents and ensure the integrity of local businesses. After years of dedicated work, the county is proud to share the, quote, "Look Before You Book" initiative. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time a county has launched an education and outreach campaign of this scope. The purpose is to educate the community about what to look for before booking a massage, so that consumers can distinguish between a legal entity and an illegal one. We have long been aware that some businesses in Montgomery County offer illegal services, often as a front for commercial sex operations or human trafficking. These illicit massage businesses exploit victims through force, fraud, or coercion. Often these illegal activities are hidden alongside other forms of Eastern medicine, such as acupuncture and acupressure. It is our responsibility to protect you. Professionals who provide these services should be properly trained and licensed, and it's unacceptable that this is not a standard that every establishment in our community has met. Our goal is to ensure the safety of both the individuals receiving services and the professionals providing them. Supported by $25,000 in grant funding and additional grants received from the Health and Human Services, this campaign will be highly visible. Starting the week of February 9th and running through the end of June, you will see commercials on Xfinity cable system channels, bus ads, social media outreach, and geofencing targeted messaging. We are also working to improve state and local laws to hold criminals responsible. This includes taking action against establishment owners and landlords who allow these activities to persist. Illicit massage is not a new problem, but our approach is new to keep our community safer. I want to express my deep gratitude to the Commission for Women's Human Trafficking Prevention Committee for their efforts to get us to this point. Specifically, I want to thank Committee Chair Dr. Wendy Stickle, Commission Executive Director Jody Finkelstein, and the Montgomery County Police Department Vice Unit for working together to better our community. Our Department of Health and Human Services, Fair Girls, and the University of Maryland Safe Center were also part of this collaboration. Please don't think every massage establishment is doing something illegal. The vast majority of them are legitimate businesses. Still, it's intolerable to allow any illegal activity like this to occur in our community. I hope you look for red flags when making massage appointments and share that message with your family, friends, and neighbors. Finally, I want to let job seekers know about a job fair happening at the East County Regional Services Center from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Wednesday, February 11th. It's geared toward the healthcare industry. Whether you're reconnecting with your career after a layoff or taking your first step toward a healthcare profession, you're not alone. We're here as a community ready to support you. To everyone impacted by the recent federal workforce reductions, we feel your pain and we are committed to standing with you. We believe our job isn't done when the headlines move on. It's just the beginning. That's exactly why this fair has been organized, to bring employers, resources, and strategies directly to you. This will also serve as a resource fair offering practical guidance on job search tools and interview techniques. It will also be an opportunity for job seekers to access local support services from resume workshops to counseling. Register ahead of time through the Maryland Workforce Exchange at nwejobs.maryland.gov with the event ID number 117289. I wish everyone in search of a job the best of luck in finding something soon. That's it for now. Have a great weekend, and we'll have another video for you again next week. Take care, be safe, and enjoy the warm weather next week.